Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the kickoff session of SustainaCity Urban Innovation Challenge, organized by Temasik's Ecosperity platform and brought to you by Arki Singapore. I'm Ting Ting, and I'm part of Arki SG team. Well, as a kind reminder, we highly encourage all of you to switch on your cameras, yeah? So with us today, we have over 160 teams with more than 400 participants from more than 15 countries. So a big shout out to you all folks out there. And just by showing up today, we have achieved a small win for the climate. So I'm sure all of you are excited to get cracking. So to kick off today's session, please kindly welcome Keith Lin, Director in Temasik's Public Affairs team, to say a few words. Keith, please.
Thanks, Ting Ting, for the introduction. And a very good, I suppose, afternoon or evening, depending on where you are dialing in from the world. I think it's really the first time, really, that in quite a long while that we've had such a quite a diverse participation from so many countries and markets. I think we have over 20 countries. And some of you, and so shout out to those of you from not just from Asia, but also from far away places. Like I believe we have participants from Turkey, Austria, Spain, Germany, Kenya, South Africa, the US, Canada, and interestingly from Finland as well. So very big thank you for joining us for this kickoff and your very first virtual session. I just wanted to give a quick introduction. My name is Keith, and I lead Temasik's sustainability communications and advocacy efforts. And some of you may wonder, what is Temasik? What do we do? Right. So Temasik is actually a Singapore headquartered global investment company. We have a net portfolio value of more than 403 billion Singapore dollars, which equates to about close to 300 billion US dollars. More importantly, I think we are a long-term investor, and that is why we have our purpose of so every generation prospers, which really guides us to make a difference or to want to make a difference for today and future generations. And that is why sustainability is truly at the core of everything that we do. So through competitions like this, the investments that we make, and some of the solutions that we're capitalizing, hopefully we can make a dent in the universe to tackle some of the biggest challenges the world faces, including obviously climate, which I think we're all here today to learn and discuss and also ideate. A quick introduction to Ecosperity. So Ecosperity is Temasik's key platform for sustainability engagement and advocacy. And the word Ecosperity twins the words ecology and prosperity, right? And that reflects really our design and our intent and our belief that doing well and doing good must come together. Ecosperity brings together leaders, from private sector, civil society, and academia as well, and of course, our next generation, which are you guys, to exchange views, share best practices, and really push the agenda on sustainable development. And you may wonder, what does this challenge that you have today, SustainaCity, have to do with Ecosperity? So just wanted to sort of share a bit of context around that. I think across the world, you see cities, big engines for innovation, for growth, for economic activity, right? I think many of you do come from cities and urban areas. The bad news for climate is they are also a key contributor to climate impact or to climate change. So cities today cover about only 2% of the world's surface, but they consume a disproportionate 78% of the world's energy and produce over 70% of CO2 emissions. Now that's clearly not great. And at the same time, the world is also becoming increasingly urban, right? Now today, about just over half of the world's population live in cities, but by 2050, that number will increase to 68%. And close to 9% of the increase is happening here in Asia as well as in Africa. So clearly we cannot be effective as a world, as a global community, in being able to address climate change and limit global warming, right, to the 1.5 degree stipulated in the time frame that's required, right, without radical ideas approaches, and ways to really transform our cities. And that is why we have launched this SustainaCity Urban Innovation Challenge. So our hope really is through this challenge that you, right, as the next generation, of leaders and enablers in your own cities, your own communities, will be inspired and think about transformational ways we can continue to decarbonize our cities, even as we grow our cities and our urban populations and economies continue to grow alongside that. That's a big challenge. And together with your teammates and your friends that you will make throughout this journey, I think we really want to encourage you to reflect and explore some of the themes, right, that we are talking about in terms of cities, decarbonization, and transformation. Number one, on energy, how can we reduce carbon emissions from the way cities and communities consume energy on a day-to-day basis? Number two, transport, right? How can we transform our urban transport systems and help people to continue moving, because that's what cities do. We move people around efficiently, affordably, but also not cause harm to the environment. Right. Buildings and infrastructure. Right. How can we rethink the way buildings are built? Buildings, infrastructure, they are the fundamental heartbeat of every city. But how do we do so in a way that meets the net zero agenda? And also, right, how can we ensure that our urban environment is working in harmony with our natural ecosystems, right? So that we can make our cities much more resilient to climate change, but also contribute to the health and well-being of our citizens in the cities. So my encouragement is these are big issues, and I really would love, for everyone as you go about your teams and your ideas to discuss and iterate, right, on your ideas, but most importantly, have a good time and really enjoy the process. I think, as Tinting says, this is the start of a journey. And over the next month, I really encourage you to make the most of the learning through the workshops. I believe there are 3 workshops in total. We'll have wonderful sharing of insights from industry speakers, from the likes of the GoTo Group, Sabana Jurong City Global, and there'll be also one-to-one team coaching sessions with the Arki coaches, which I think you will benefit immensely from. At the end of the day, there are exciting prizes to be won, including what I think will definitely be a deeply enriching learning experience trip to Helsinki, Finland, that's hosted by Arki Finland. We are also looking very much forward from the eco-prosperity perspective to your submissions, and the plan is to have 6 of your teams, right, make it to the finals, and for your solutions, the final solutions, to be showcased at Eco-Prosperity Week, which is our flagship sustainability conference happening in June. But I am going ahead of myself. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I wish you all a wonderful time of learning and connecting with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for the rousing address. We would also like to do a virtual shout out and thanks to all our partners who have helped us reach out to all of you here today. Global Compact Network Singapore, WWF, Temasek Foundation, just to name a few. Okay, at the beginning, I've mentioned that we have more than 15 countries being represented here today. In fact, my data person tells me there's more. Let's do a little word cloud poll on Slido. Has everyone scanned the code to join in Slido? If not, please kindly scan the QR code being flashed on screen to answer the following question. So which country are you joining us from today? So you can just key in, I think Singapore will be a very huge cloud, probably India, and all the Southeast Asian countries. I see Malaysia. Oh, that's very big. Wow, okay. Fantastic. There's more popping up. Let's have a look. Thailand, India, Turkey, USA, Germany. Thank you for joining despite your time difference. Is in Nebraska? Wow, fantastic. Okay, Vietnam, Australia, Malaysia, Japan, Cambodia, Austria. We really have very good representation. So thank you again to all our partners Okay, SG. All right, I think that's quite a good representation. Thank you so much. So this was really just a warm-up exercise for you guys to get used to Slido, because as we journey the entire afternoon, you're encouraged to put in your questions to our speakers later. So Slido will be our main vehicle for transferring that. Yeah. Okay. Now, to refresh everyone's minds, we would like to recap the competition guidelines. Okay. So what are the requirements? The submission package should include a video no longer than 3 minutes and a 500-word short essay. So it's just for you to understand, the video should show your solution with audio visual aids. So for example, if you made a model, talk about the model with your video, in your video. If you have an animation, show your animation. If you create an entire mini city in SketchUp or Rhino, whatever, do a fly through. We encourage you to think big, think fancy, right? And be imaginative in your way you want to express yourself. That is all very good. And as mentioned, the top 6 teams will be chosen to deliver a live virtual pitch and stand a chance to win a top cash prize of $10,000 and an all-expense paid trip to Helsinki, Finland. It will be hosted by Arki International. So that doesn't that sound exciting? Okay, so with every competition, there are judges, right? And so we're very excited and honored to have established a stellar lineup of industry experts to judge and lend their support to this challenge. We have, in no particular order, Alvin Mehta, Head of Real Estate, Temasek; Hannah Sullivan, Group Head of Sustainability, GoTo, so GoTo is Gojek and Tokopedia; Nina Yang, CEO of SustainaCity Global; Professor Madhavi Srinivasan, Executive Director of Energy Research Institute, ERI for short, at NTU, Singapore; and lastly, Elizabeth Clark, Conservation Director at World Wildlife Fund, Singapore. So this is really, really stellar cast of judges. So I'm sure they'll lend their expertise to all of us. Okay, let's run through the judging criteria. So what will the panel, right, be looking for? We encourage you, if you're not sure about the criteria, we encourage you to ask questions and interact with us throughout the session. So please use the same Slido link that was given to you earlier. So solutions will be scored on these 5 criteria. Yeah. Number 1, sustainability impact. So how does the proposal contribute to a net zero city? So you guys will be assessed on the potential positive impact of the solution on the key indicators of sustainable city, including, but not limited to, energy efficiency, net positive energy reduction, reduction of waste and CO2 emissions, and enhancement of biodiversity. 2, innovation and creativity. That's pretty straightforward, right? So how well does your proposal align with the competition theme, and how innovative and original is it? 3, integration with other systems. So what does it mean? So how well does your proposal integrate with and complement other systems in the city? So oftentimes good solutions stand on the shoulders of others, right? So showing interconnectivity and interdependence with other systems is important. And whether you take care to ensure net positive multiplier effects and reduce trade-offs. 4, feasibility and scalability. So how practical and feasible is a proposed solution as implementation? Teams must demonstrate practicality and viability of the proposed solutions, including considerations such as cost, scalability to other cities, maybe, and other environments, and sustainability over the long term. And finally, presentation and communication. So how effectively and coherently does your proposal communicate the solution and its potential impact? So including the audio-visual aids I mentioned, models, and written materials. So, okay, so much for the 5 judging criteria. I'm sure you have questions, so let us pause here to take a few questions from the floor, if there are any. Okay, so it seems like my producers say that there's actually no questions from the floor, so I guess we are quite clear on that. But if there is, just please do not hesitate to write to us, or when you have any questions, you can bring it up with your coaches. Yeah. Okay. So save the dates. So there are 3 workshops all in all. I'm going to repeat the process. Yeah.
Good.
So Is there a question? May we have it? There are no questions. Okay, let's move on. Yeah. So there are 3 workshops. The first one today is ideating. Second one is prototyping, and then storytelling. So the dates are all set up here, which today is the first. So at least one representative for each team must attend in order to qualify. And I'm guaranteeing you it's going to be a rewarding afternoon of interaction and sharing from distinguished speakers. And our creative coaches from Archie will conduct one-on-one check-ins with all the teams. It's not mandatory, yeah, but we highly encourage you to check in for some feedback. So to be sure to reserve a slot on Calendly with all your assigned coaches if you haven't done so already. Of course, we have the speakers, and who do we have lined up? So we have, well, for today, we have Prasun Kumar from Billion Bricks. Next session, we Bjorn Lowe from the urban farming sector. We have Tana Sullivan from GoTo. And in the third and last session, we have Willie Lee from Volocopter, one of the first urban air mobility companies in Asia. And of course, Nina Young from City Global. All right, so now let's actually just introduce our first fireside chat speaker, Mr. Prasun Kumar, CEO and co-founder of Billion Bricks. So let me just introduce, give him a little bit of background. So where do we start, right? Prasun was a President Design Awardee. He's a TEDx speaker and also a social justice campaigner, working towards solving the climate and housing crisis. So he began his career as an architect, working across the globe. In 2013, he left his corporate job to start a Billion Bricks together with his partner, Anurag, who is also the founding partner of Jungle Ventures. Together, they were driven by a joint mission to empower everyone to own a dignified home sustainably, both in economics and environmental terms. To achieve this, Billion Bricks is now pioneering the development of the world's first income-generating, carbon-negative to net zero solar homes and communities. To date, it has provided shelters, schools, and homes. Let me go to the next slide, actually. To more than 5,000 people across 9 countries, rendered relief support to another 14,000. Its first innovation called Weather Hide is an award-winning life-saving emergency shelter. Aston Kutcher called it innovation at its finest. And the net zero homes prototype has been presented to heads of state as a working business and housing model. Billion Bricks is now part of Energy Ventures, the world's largest private energy producer and part of its network companies. So as we are chatting, please field your questions and we reflect it in our Q&A. So without further ado, please put our virtual hands together to give a warm welcome to Prasun.
Thank you for having me here and looking forward to the conversation and also, more importantly, the questions that people have got for me.
Okay, let me just tune the volume up a little bit. Okay. All right. So could we kind of actually share the first slide that I'm showing right now? Okay. So net zero homes, I guess it's a very interesting word in net zero homes and communities. So what is it? So maybe you can, share with us the concept. How did it come about?
Yeah, so essentially net zero home means that the houses that we are designing, when you look at their carbon emissions, there's no net negative carbon emissions that they'll contribute to the planet Earth. So anything that they do generate will be offsetted by just how we are designing and including some of the technologies in the house. The reason why this came about is actually a little bit different than looking at a net zero home. Billion Bricks, as you mentioned in the beginning, was actually founded with a vision to end homelessness. So we are driven more by housing than by net zero requirements. And one of the key learnings I had during the first couple of years in building Billion Bricks is that the key reason why people don't get access to affordable housing is housing finance. And therefore, the idea was that, is there a way for us to generate income for people where the houses could be self-sustaining? And we came up with this idea of putting a large number of solar panels onto the roofs that could generate more energy than the house would consume. We could sell that energy to create additional income for the homeowners that they could use to offset the cost of the homes that they would have. And as we developed the idea more, we realized and learned that just by putting this large number of solar panels, we actually offset significant amount of carbon emissions for the houses. And in about 6 to 7 years, they are completely carbon neutral. And the life of solar panels about 25 years commercial life, which means they'll turn out to be more carbon negative than not just being carbon neutral. And considering the fact that houses typically have a life of 60 years or more, they would really offset significant amount of carbon emissions per house.
No, I think that's very significant. I think when everything comes together, it actually does have a significant impact. So actually, I would like to go to the housing clusters in Cambodia. This is the Smile Village that so you have actually started off prototyping villages as well as individual homes, and then you kind of spread out to communities. Could you talk a little bit about your housing clusters in Cambodia?
Yeah, so Smile Village is a project that we did much earlier on, I think in 2015, when I first founded Billion Bricks. And the focus was really on providing homes. And Smile Villages in Cambodia is a project which is meant for families that have been living on top of a big pile of trash in Phnom Penh. And I remember going there and there was a signboard, or actually I think I spoke to one of the founders of the NGO that we were participating with, and they mentioned that they had a signboard in that community where you would see these tick marks for the number of children that had died, because at times bulldozers would come, they wouldn't see the kids are playing in all the trash there. And that's when they decided that they need to be actually moved out and shifted to another part of the city. So this was really meant for families that had moved to Phnom Penh but were living on this pile of trash. And then we had planned for, I think, about 240 homes, of which 60 got built. And the idea was really to look at local typology on how people live, and stilted house, as you can see in the images, was very common. But I think more importantly than the houses was this whole idea, which I think is common in Southeast Asia. Some of the people listening here would understand, called Gotong Rayong, which is about building community together to sustain and learn from each other. And that's where you see these kind of small vegetable gardens. So the idea was one would grow potatoes, the other would grow chilies and tomatoes, and they could then go and exchange, and that would create this spirit of communal and village living as they live in these houses. And the same ideas then we started taking forward to say, okay, I mean, house is just one component of a village, and as you keep going into larger and larger communities that you want to build, you can actually extend and bring in more amenities and fabric that makes a community work. At the end of the day, we are not individual people, we are social animals, and we need a good infrastructure to live a healthy life.
Indeed. Okay, so this is the school that you also, not just housing, you actually built structures that a community needs, such as schools, hospitals, and so on and so forth, right? Let me go forward a little bit. I would like to ask you a little bit about environmental impact, because Billion Bricks is quite specific in terms of the environmental and financial net benefits. So for example, you stated here, 500 homes that you provide would have a 10 megawatt solar generating capacity and more than 15,000 tons of CO2 emissions saved each year. Can you just walk us through a little bit of that net carbon reductions per home, and if you extrapolate per community, what is the net positive effect? And also, in your opinion, what trade-offs are there that you have to make as a designer?
Yeah, so essentially the unit that you see on the right side is a community, but the unit within that is a house. And like I mentioned, it has a large number of solar panels. So each house has about 20 kilowatt peak capacity. So to give you a sense of scale, typically a house like this, which is about 30 square meter in area, would consume or would have a consumption capacity of less than 1 kilowatt peak. So this is producing about 20 times or 25 times more energy than what the house would consume. And for us, the idea was, what kind of a proportion do we need between the house and the area of the roof in order for us to generate enough income so we can offset the complete cost of the house. And therefore, we came up with this proportion of about 70 square meter in roof area, about 30 square meter in house area. And as you sell the energy based on the price of energy, we are able to offset. So the number that you see, about 15,332 tons of offset, is really primarily on the back of the energy renewable energy that you're producing. And what it means is that when you produce clean renewable energy from solar panels, you're not having to produce energy from a conventional mean, which could be coal, for example. So if you are using something which is very high in carbon emissions like coal, then this number becomes very large. If you're operating in an area where maybe the consumption of energy is maybe by hydro, then this tonnage would be much, much lesser. So for us, like I said, the key criteria for starting and coming up with this idea was housing affordability. And we realized that by putting these solar panels, we actually have a huge net positive environmental impact as well. If you dig deeper into the house, I think we are not only looking at energy or carbon emissions from energy, we are looking at offsetting or rather harvesting 100% of the rainwater in the house. We clean the entire sewage within the house without any effluents which come out, which could be damaging to the environment or be unsafe. And we also grow the own food within the house. And I think you have enough area to offset about 30% of your calorie intake per year with the area that we provide. And the real reason for this was that when we work in remote communities or with very, very poor communities, we may, as house designers, go and build a house and maybe even put solar panels, but a house needs a lot more infrastructure to be built. And that has dependencies on governments, on other institutions, and they may not be as efficient, or they may have their own constraints, and that infrastructure may not come in. And therefore, the idea was to build in something which is plug and play. And as you combine the carbon savings and environmental savings, and from all of those things combined, it turns out to be quite large.
So it's true that in designing this, you truly have to empathize with the needs, right, of the end user, because otherwise this wouldn't be a product that they would actually end up wanting to use. So that's really thoughtful in that design or thought process. You brought up something that was quite interesting, interdependency. So although your product, your house design, it's rather self-sufficient on many levels, I think energy integration and urban planning must be the two big things you have to tackle early on. So how difficult or easy was it for you to get local governments or energy providers to be on board with this together with you? So for example, like power purchase agreements, or EPAs that you have to deal with. I mean, we don't have to go into much detail, but really to get a sense of the practical hurdles that you have met with.
Oh, so the practical hurdles are extremely hard. The fact that you see more images in these slides than real projects means that how difficult it is. And it's very attractive as a concept to come in and talk. And that's why I get invited to places like this as a concept. But in reality, to apply this is next to impossible, right? So even though we have actually been fairly successful, we built 4 of these prototypes right now, but it has taken us about 4 years to actually build these prototypes. So it's a very long process. In order to build it, we have managed to sign what is called a power purchase agreement for our 10 megawatt community that we want to build in the Philippines. But at the local government level, or in general, I think at every level of stakeholders involved, it's very hard to get people aligned in order to execute a project like this. And the reason is primarily that the level of innovation in this from an actual implementation is very hard. So it may seem straightforward that you can put solar panels on a house, and you may have seen in your communities and neighborhoods that it gets done, but it doesn't get done in the scale and the financial model that we have attached to with it anywhere. And that creates, for governments, for financiers, for any of the partners that need to work with, a level of risk in the project. And it requires them to overcome that risk and therefore jump in and say, okay, let's build it. And that's a very, very hard thing. And I mean, we don't have to go and look at all these stakeholders. We can look at ourselves. How many of us have got solar panels on our rooftops? Or how many of us have made any change in our lifestyles in order to address what we believe is a big problem that we are tackling in terms of climate change, right? So it's very hard for us to change our own lifestyle. So you can imagine when Billion Bricks goes out to say that, okay, let's now look at a new model of building these communities, how hard would it be for anyone to change and do that? And in fact, I should maybe add, since you mentioned that we empathize with people and communities on what they need. And I think empathy is a great word. So we need to empathize with ourselves to say, are we willing to make this change in our lives? before we go out and say, would we make change in other people's lives, right?
Very, very well said, actually. And okay, maybe last question from me, and then we can throw it open to the floor. We've talked about this before. You said, and I'm going to paraphrase you, right? It's easy to give something away for free because no one minds having free things. But now that you have to sell it, that's a real test. So from being a not-for-profit to a for-profit company, so what are the kinds of battles, be it business or policies, that you're facing currently? How do you then help your company to kind of go to the different markets, right? Because they are actually essentially different housing markets. And perhaps you can share some insights with our friends here.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think we don't realize when we work in nonprofits, or I'm sure a lot of people here give donations to nonprofits as well, and they find that the work that nonprofits are doing, or the houses they are giving, or anything that they're giving out is a great support to the society, and it really helps the people, right? But they never have the true test to know that would people pay for it, right? So if I was to get a free gift from somewhere when I go out in a store, I'll take it. But would I pay $5 or $10 for it? I think is really when you have to stop by and think, right? So I think we have to be very, very therefore careful when we give something for free and people say it really works for us and we are very happy. The question is, would they pay for it? And I think that's the test that Billion Bricks is now going through, the fact that will people pay for such a house? And it comes with the same level of resistance now that we actually have to sell a house with solar panels. When we go and speak to homeowners, they have tons of questions about their safety, about their maintenance, about their ownership, about the cost, and why should they live in a house which is different from their neighbor's house. The same goes for water harvesting. So would the tank leak? Who will repair it? And why would the water going to be clean in what they're building? The same with sewage, same with food production and everything, right? So the questions become much more intense that you need to answer. And it also gives you a more clear feedback on what people are actually looking at. And that's when you realize that when people are making a decision by putting money to buy a house, the key criteria that they have there is the location. So no one really cares for environment, sustainability, even though we may be able to cover some of the costs of the house. That's secondary to the fact that do they want to live in that location or not? Is it close to where they work or where there are schools, there are hospitals, what other infrastructures there, how would they commute? That's the first question. Then the second question is whether they can afford it or not. And an affordability as well, even though Billion Bricks houses would be cheaper by about 20%, is actually doesn't move the needle. The point is whether somebody would finance these houses for them at that location and make it affordable for them. So the point really here is that we may come up with great ideas, but I think the on-ground realities are very, very different. And we should not get swayed by what we read in the media or what we read about how things are changing. I think we have to be very much grounded. And really, I think the first step is to empathize with ourselves and see what would our criteria be when we were to go out and buy a house, and not look at when we work with either poor communities or with anybody else as an external agent of change. They would not be any different as well. And I think that's a key learning for us. So we've done a lot of surveys in the market, we've done focus groups, but I think it's still going to be a test when we eventually launch. Would people buy these houses or not?
Thank you so much for like really practical and on the ground insights that you have garnered over the years. I think we have quite a number of questions coming in from the audience. So can we maybe have a look at them and then maybe we'll field some of it? Okay, maybe let's go to the first one. So how are the solar panels maintained, and is the community involved in the maintenance?
Yeah, so Billion Bricks maintains the solar panels for 25 years. The community's involvement in maintenance is actually not there. They are on their rooftop, so all we want them is to not damage them and allow us access to the roofs.
Okay, maybe the second one then. So then, is there any process in place for dealing with the waste generated by the panels? So 20, 25 years down the line. So when it comes to obsolescence, natural obsolescence, how do we then deal with them? So it's quite interesting.
I get this question asked a lot of times, and I find this question very strange in the sense that when we work with poor communities in providing solar panels, we are so worried about these solar panels, what will happen 10, 20 to 25 years down the line, while we keep throwing our cell phones every 2 years and we don't think about it. We don't ask these questions to big companies that produce fast fashion, shoes, everything that we use. Nothing in our lives today lasts for 20 to 25 years. But when we go and want to help poor people get access to housing, we are so worried about what happens to the waste 20 to 25 years down the panel, which, I mean, I can give you an answer, but in reality, I also don't know. I mean, that's not my area of expertise on how panels get decommissioned, how panels get recycled at the 20 to 25 years line. But the only thing I would say is that the advantage our communities have is that the solar panels are the roof. So therefore, we do not decommission panels at 20 to 25 years. They last until the houses will last. And at the end stage of life cycle of the houses, which we expect to be about 60 years, we believe there would be a methodology through which solar panels would be decommissioned and recycled. But I think this is where we need to start really thinking what question we want to ask at the right place and what is driving the work that we are doing. And for Billion Bricks, the key driver is that today there are more than 1 billion people that don't have access to housing. We don't have perfect solutions to provide to them, and we want to go as fast as possible in first providing access to housing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, I would like to address the question from Cambodia. So hi, I'm Darlin from Cambodia. Hi, Darlin. So can you please describe the challenges part of the Smile Village? So I think that's a very interesting project. That's where you had a lot of learning. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there were 2 key challenges. One is that before we got into the project, there actually had been a lot of other NGOs that were trying to develop the project. And they had gotten actually their designs and foundations wrong. And what this means is that oftentimes when you work in the nonprofit sector, the quality of work that you can produce is very hard. You can get access to maybe volunteers who are structural engineers and doing, but the level of commitment and accountability is low. And therefore the quality of work is very, very poor. So we should be very careful when we go and work in these communities and when we work with volunteers, we have enough talent to even cross-check what's getting done. So I think that was a key learning we had before we went into there. The second challenge was really how do you sustain this project, right? So like I said, we have built in 60 houses, but for us to do the full 240 houses has taken us many, many years, and we still haven't finished the whole project. So financing becomes very, very challenging. And it's really about when it's a donation-based project, the time is very long, and motivation of people is very, very hard to keep them motivated for that period of long. So people change, their motivations change. And that I think becomes the biggest challenge to be able to deliver projects like these. But otherwise, I mean, when you visit there, it's a great environment. I mean, you see the school that's there and playgrounds. It's very, very heartening.
So I guess the main takeaway I have anyways, is I think for things like it to sustain, it should be a for-profit social enterprise as opposed to a organization based entirely on volunteer work. So therefore that's
I wouldn't say like it needs to be for-profit social enterprise. I think we just need to get our values aligned right. It doesn't mean if we are doing a non-profit work or if we are working with the poor people, we have to work differently or we have to think about them differently, right? Like I said, we have to first empathize with ourselves. Would we want these houses for ourselves? Or would we want these kind of houses for a paying client or customer? And am I working with the same level of rigor? Am I asking the same level of question that I would ask? And often I find when we work with poor communities or non-profit side, the questions are good. They're very rigorous, like about the environment or decommissioning of panels, but we never ask the same questions when we work with our customers on the for-profit side. And I think that's difference is something we have to recognize and overcome.
So maybe I'll throw this question out. So once you've given this home over to a homeowner, what was the feedback you received from them as homeowners?
You mean in case of Smile Village or in general?
Well, maybe you can address Smile Village or in general.
Well, I mean, it's been very, very positive. I think the key principle that drove Billion Bricks' work is the fact that we never designed poorly for the poor. So our homes are never the cheapest homes. So we are not driven by cost. We are driven by what we believe is right for people and what they are looking for. And that gives us very, very positive feedback from people where they are actually in some cases shocked that they received homes like this. And we've had some NGOs that have come in and said that, oh, if you provide homes of this quality, then it makes us look not so good. And we can't afford to provide homes of this thing. And that should we really be doing this and working as a common right? So I think the feedback overall is very positive.
Good. Okay. There's one question I feel that ties in directly to our theme today, which is ideating. So the question is, how did you land on solar panels to provide additional income for homeowners? What were the other ideas that you considered, but then ended up scrapping? So it's about the ideating process.
Now, this is a great question, I think. I mean, so the first part is easier, right? So what we do is that we take the energy that we generate from the solar roofs, we combine it from all the 500 homes that you saw, and we then sign a power purchase agreement with an energy buying company, and we sell the energy to them. And when selling the energy, we receive some revenue, and part of that revenue is shared with the homeowners, and that becomes their additional income from the roof that they get. Now, the ideas that we explored were, I mean, it was a very long process for a long time, but the key thing that we were looking for is how can we design a house which what we call as an income generating house. So we initially started to see, is there a way for us to create some jobs within the house? So could we create maybe a room in the house where somebody could run a sewing machine or some other skill that they may have access to, and that becomes a way for them to generate income, and we can provide employment, or we could even look at more high-tech jobs like call centers. We even looked at things like crypto mining, where you just need a laptop computer to be sitting there and mining something, and there's some revenue generated. So the idea was really, what are different ways in which passively income can be generated? But eventually, I think for us, it was more alignment on what we see is a trend in the market, is having acceptance, and therefore will have the least resistance in order to go and then apply. So solar, as you know, is really picking up. There's a lot of knowledge about there. There's a lot of financing, understanding the technology is improving. So I think the questions that we have to answer in case of solar are far easier.
Okay, so yeah, so it's wherever the resources are most abundant, right? So then I guess with sunlight, full countries like India, the Philippines, Southeast Asian countries mostly, I think will benefit from it. Okay, last question. So let me have a look. Okay, this has been up for quite a while. So if factors like location and cost, it's a business question, I guess, are primary considerations for consumers, how then do you incentivize the builders or investors to choose to partner building bricks?
Yeah, I think this is the question for which if I have the answer, then we would be going ahead and building lots of these communities today. I'm losing my hair every day in trying to answer this question. How do I incentivize builders and investors, right? So, I mean, our incentive to them is that this is a project which is 100% commercially viable project. So if they make an X rate of return on a standard affordable housing community, they would make the same, if not less, or if not more, rate of return on this particular project. But this has a lot larger number of externalities which are positive on the environment side, on the fact that they can look good on the branding side, and plus the fact that they can actually now sell their homes to a wider market, them being more affordable as well. So therefore, their homes will sell much, much faster. The same thing on the investor side. Investors are looking to see, are there projects which have a good positive ESG component or environmental, social or governance component attached to them, where this fits in very, very well. But like I said, the struggle or the difficulty is that none of them are willing to take the risk on the first community. And they are okay to do the next one, but the first one is too dangerous for them to do. And that's the puzzle that I'm spending 24/7 these days in trying to find an answer. So if any of you have an answer, you should drop me an email. I think Tinting will share it later with you guys. And then we can probably go ahead and build one.
Okay, well, I said last question, but actually we have another one that has been upvoted by everybody in the audience. So I guess we should field that one. So how much of the planning process is entirely done by your team alone, and how much of it, if any, was done together with important partners or stakeholders or at communities?
I'm not sure if I understand the question well, but we do everything. So what we do is that we go in first, find a site where this community can be built. And in order to find a site, we go and actually look at some developers and say, would you have a site that you are looking to do an affordable housing community, and would you be willing to do a billion bricks community there on that piece of land? Once we receive that piece of land, then we understand at the price point that these homes need to be sold, what is the typology of homes that gets sold and the customer likes them. So we've done enough research in the last several months in order to understand that. We take those houses that we've kind of standardized, and then we do the full master planning on the site. And we have two teams in Billion Bricks. One team which is architects and planners. We have a team which is specialized in doing solar farms. So we make sure that the community not only works from an architectural standpoint, but also as an optimized solar farm. So we lay that out, and then we go out to developers and say, okay, you like that? We take it out to the local government unit, say, does it work and meet all your standards? So the participation at that level is at a much later stage once we've done it. And the idea is to go in and then build, like how you do in any commercial projects, build a show flat, invite people to say, okay, now would you want to put your money down on this show flat? Once they put the money down, then we go in and build it. So the process is fairly linear, and there's a check-in from each stakeholder at one point from the other in order for us to get a buy-in from them.
Okay, interesting. So actually, let me just flesh it out for the audience. So it's fact-finding, and then you do feasibility studies as well as a scalability impact, right? And then you get your design team to come in to optimize the technology. So that's the environmental impact calculation. So it's actually pretty much, although linear, but actually you iterate a lot during this process, right? To back and forth to kind of make sure that you optimize for a product that you believe that the market can accept. So I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, and then you come up with the market strategy, and then you go to developer.
Yeah, I mean, we in terms of design and planning, we are very much aligned with what's already being provided in the market, right? So the idea is that, considering the fact that Billion Bricks community is a new idea, and the fact that you have to live under solar panels is itself a big change, we try and minimize any changes that are in the community that any other developer or builder is doing. So we try and stick to as few changes as we want to offer to the customer, and therefore go with the house design, plot design, community design, community amenities, which are in alignment with what people are already doing, and therefore reduce the number of elements that need to be done new in this particular community. And that holds good for builders and developers for whom change is lesser and less change is good. The same holds true for LGUs, where they only have to analyze one change. They don't have to get their head around 5 different changes that Billion Bricks has done. And the same holds good for investors as well, where they understand that, okay, developers have been doing all the other rest of the things and have been selling. So there's an acceptance on the customer side. So the only risk that they need to carry is on the solar roof side. So it's really driven by ensuring Billion Bricks' mission of providing housing to people in a scalable way in the shortest span of time. We don't want to give out the best perfect solution if it takes too long. Too many people die today because they don't have access to homes. And I find too many conversations going around in our community of designers to find the perfect solution out there for housing or for building cities as well. And I think we should be more concerned about time than about having a perfect solution.
Yes, as someone once famously said, perfect is the enemy of good, right? So once again, a huge thank you, Prasoon. It's very, very inspiring work that you're doing. I wish you and Billion Bricks all the best. And who knows, some of the participants today, they want to write to you and join your mission to make the world a better place, one net zero home at a time.
They should definitely reach out to me. Don't worry about if you're writing directly to me. most often always respond. So, and good luck with your competition. And I'll try and see what kind of ideas you come up with eventually. So good luck, everyone.
Yes, we'll share that with you. Thank you so much, Prasoon.
All right, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that was actually very inspiring. I really had a good time conversing with Prasoon. I hope you guys learned a lot from his journey, his business model, and how actually what it takes to actually run a for-profit social enterprise. Okay, so now it's close to 2 p.m. Let's call for a break time. Let's have a 10-minute refreshment break, and we shall reconvene at 2:05 to start a workshop on ideating with our coach, Stuti Kaushik. See you all in 10 minutes. Bye.